Joining me now is Doug McWilliams, the CEO of the Centre of Economics and Business Research in Kuala Lumpur. First of all, Doug, great to see you again. Always it's in London, but you're now doing an Asian tour. What's your first impression and where are you going on this Asian tour?
I'm based in KL this time round, but a couple of months ago I went to Singapore and releasing the quarterly economic insight reports for the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, and covering very much the ASEAN region.
And how worried do you think are investors, just the general people in the area, about the European impact and the US slowing down?
I think they're extremely nervous, probably even more nervous than they need be, because although there clearly is an impact, the probability is that the knock-on effects on the ASEAN economy will be rather smaller than, of course, they are in the Western world. The direct exposure of the ASEAN economy to continental Europe is not that big, and although if you add up the extra exposure once you get the knock-on effects on world trade, you do have to consider that if growth slows, a couple of other things are likely to happen. The first is that disposable incomes are likely to be helped by falling inflation, and the second thing is that we will probably see reflationary action, cuts in interest rates and probably a bit more spending from governments that have the firepower to do so, particularly in the Far East.
Now you're focusing, Doug, on Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand and Vietnam. You're saying, in fact, ASEAN GDP growth should pick up in 2013, driven by Indonesia. Are they the most isolated from the European crisis or not?
Indonesia will be affected a bit in 2012 by weak commodity prices. The probability is that commodity prices will drop a bit more. They've already come down, you were talking about this a bit earlier. Commodity prices will probably be affected in 2012. But our view is that they will bounce back in 2013 as the world economy starts to recover in 2013. We think 2012 is probably the tough year for the world economy, but if we batten down the hatches and work our way through it, by 2013 things will be starting to improve.
You talk about nervousness in Asia again, you talk about 2012 being a pretty rough year. How bad will the European situation play out? Will there be a breakup or not?
It's quite possible that the euro will break up, but I think they'll try and put some sticking plaster on it. We've got a summit today about 8 p.m. Malaysian time, and we've got a European summit later on in the week when they're going to try and put together a proposal for some kind of fiscal consolidation. Once that happens, I think we're going to see some monetary expansion. That can stave off the rainy day for a while. But ultimately, the big difficulty in Europe is lack of competitiveness and lack of growth. Italy is scheduled to be 3% down in GDP over 5 years. And when your growth goes that negative, it's very difficult to solve your debt problems. So I think ultimately it's competitiveness that's going to make it very difficult to sustain the euro. But, you know, it can keep going for a few years yet.
But again, clearly it's almost a marathon. Angela Merkel calling it a marathon overnight again. And you say the figures on Italy. Italy, 450 billion euros of bonds mature in the next 3 years, 1.9 trillion euros of debt, and growth, you say, is slowing down. It can't be fixed, can it? It's pretty almost impossible.
Yeah, we said a while ago that the Italians were going to have to wipe out some of their debt. They were going to have to restructure some of their debt. We still hold to that. But the other difficulty is we've got a big shift from the west to the east, which is making life tough for all the Western economies anyway. But within the Eurozone, there's also a shift where Germany is exporting reasonably well, but at the expense, it's gaining competitiveness at the expense of countries like Italy. Italian exports are no higher than they were 5 years ago. Italian GDP is lower than it was 5 years ago. And the combination of these things is what makes it very difficult to sustain the debt situation and the competitiveness situation. Now, they can either resolve that by implementing very severe austerity, now I'm talking about cutting living standards by 15 to 20%, or else they can restore that by devaluation. And I think eventually they'll go for the latter route.
Doug, thanks for joining us. Doug McWilliams, the CEO and founder of the CEBR.